wholeheartedly commit the issue of the decision to the supreme arbiter of the destinies of nations. Folks, there's a lot of stuff in this Declaration of Independence that applies today.
Amen.
Are we going to wait until there's housing troops in our homes?
No, sir.
We have got to wake some folks up. It's a very sad day when the Cinco de Mayo festival that'll happen in a few weeks here in Waxahachie will draw scores more than what is drawn at this celebration. This celebration doesn't even usually happen. But we're celebrating Mexico's independence from Spain, but not Texas' independence from Mexico. We've got to wake some folks up. We're forgetting our history. We're forgetting what brought us to the point where we are today. And we've got to start waking some folks up and reminding them. I don't know what it's going to take, folks. I know each and every one of you looks next to you and wishes that there was 10 people standing where one is, or 100 people standing where one is. And that's the way it ought to be. We ought to have this square filled up. We're in desperate times, folks. But I would just like to make a plea to you to do whatever you can to wake the people in your circle of influence up. Each and every one of us has a circle of influence. People that listen to us and care what our opinion is. And you just need to be vocal right now when all we're asking is for you to be vocal. These guys that fought at San Jacinto, they were doing way more than being vocal. They were putting their lives on the line. And the guys at Goliad, and the guys at the Alamo, the guys at Refugio, they all laid their lives down on the line. And if we can just lend our voice to this cause whenever we can, it's a lot less of a sacrifice than has already been paid for us. So I just would like to urge each and every one of you to just be that watchman on the wall in your circle of influence. Thank you for coming out, and God bless you.
Thank you, TJ. We have another open mic. We're going to have an open mic between each speaker. So if any, start thinking about what you want to say and if you want to say, and come on up here. Like TJ was saying, I would encourage everybody to get the Texas Independence, the U.S. Declaration of Independence, your U.S. Constitution, and drag out the Texas Constitution, but beware, it's long. No, you'll have to come up here if you want to speak. So, while we're waiting for him to come up, does anybody out here need a copy of the Constitution? If you do, I can set you up. I've got one. Anybody, put your hand up if you need one. Y'all know it? Memorized it? No one's doing against it? TJ's right. We need to stand up. Tell them we don't like what they're doing. Don't give up till they quit.
Folks, I want to thank y'all for letting me speak. My name is Michael Trice. And I want to talk about something San Jacinto and Alamo had in common that I don't see a lot of today. bravery, intestinal fortitude, as some would say guts. The Texians, as they were called at that time, stood against great odds and did the best they could. In some cases, they gave their lives and their all. But they gave us a republic, which remains to this day. And we need to again instill some intestinal fortitude in ourselves and our state. Because, well, as my t-shirt says, Waco, never forget, 20 years and no justice yet. Friday was the 20th anniversary, and I didn't hear a peep about it on the television. 86 men, women, and children were burned to death, 17 of them under the age of 5. I had a particular councilman, not from here, from East Texas, said there was justice. He said that cult leader was crispy fried. And I said, hey idiot, this was a church school. These people maintained a belief basic to the Seventh-day Adventists. Yes, they owned weapons. Some say stockpiled, but there were 2 men that had FFL licenses who dealt firearms at gun shows. And last time I checked, when you stockpiled weapons, it was called an inventory. And they had less weapons per capita than the people of Texas. Now, they didn't fire the first shot either. They had been firing at them for 10 minutes before they returned fire.
1 minute, please.
So, what I want us to say, I have a few of them left. I've got one especially for Sheriff Johnny Brown, a DVD, Waco, A New Revelation, because there were only 2 major movies that were ever made about it, and they were both made by the same man, Mr. McNulty. He made the first one and found afterwards 2 rooms of evidence that were never even allowed into the trial that the Texas Rangers had. And he went through there and decided he needed to make one more, and this is it. So I do have a few of them left. I've got one for the sheriff and anybody else. The few that I have left, you're welcome to them. Thank you. Have a blessed week.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Paul Brown. What's your last name? Perry.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
And I did know what's your name?
Perry, last I checked. What do I do? Stick this in my pocket? Okay. Probably my cell phone will probably go off. I think it's fine that as Americans we talk about Lexington and Concord, but Texans have another battle to celebrate, and its name is San Jacinto. Now, a lot of Americans nowadays are dispirited. After the defeat of the defenders of the Alamo, a small mission converted into a fort that was seized initially from the Mexicans by a Texan force that included Tejanos. And that fact is too often overlooked. In December of 1835. And the murders of Texan POWs who surrendered under agreement at Goliad, Texans were in deep despair. The attempt by the Texan colonialists and the older settlers, often of Spanish blood, to
regain their rights under the Mexican Constitution of 1824 seemed a dim hope in what was left of a Texian army. That army slogged through very tough, deep mud in an unusually wet Texas spring. Our concept of liberty rested on the shoulders of one Sam Houston, and hopefully a merciful God. That same drenching rain and swollen rivers were preventing the Mexican army under the tyrant Santa Anna from resupplying, something that we don't talk about in grade school anymore. And much of his artillery was unable to move in the mud. Santa Anna had dispersed his forces, which numbered between 4,000 and 6,000. Houston continued to retreat and his men were near mutiny. But the Texans stripped everything from their towns and farms, even putting buildings erected with their own bent backs and calloused palms to the torch. Texians continued to retreat, and Santa Anna's men started to starve. Similar to what happened to Napoleon in Russia, or Hitler in Russia. The weather was against them. The tyrant, in his arrogance, split his forces yet again and again. In the continuous Texas gloom, much of Liberty's friend, General Spring, was making his appearance to aid General Houston. The Mexican army attempted to resupply from the sea. Something else we don't talk about enough. In a too little told story, the Texian Navy, outgunned and outmanned, defeated the Mexicans at sea time and time again, capturing supplies of over 300 kegs of gunpowder that were taken at sea and furnished to the Texian army. At one point during that battle, a Texas ship with 8 guns defeated a Mexican ship with 24. Meanwhile, near San Jacinto, Texan scout Deaf Smith captured Mexican soldiers that told that Santa Anna was close. Houston informed friends in a letter, "We must conquer or perish." Folks, it was all on one dice roll. Houston waited to attack until Governor Cosa's men joined Santa Anna, swelling the Mexican numbers to 1,260 men. More trickled in to Santa Anna's force. And at that time, Houston ordered Deaf Smith to sneak out and take down Vince's Bridge. Vince's Bridge provided the only means of escape, the only easy means of escape for both armies due to the swollen bayou. 900 or so Texans charged Santa Anna's army. They fell upon the tyrant's army after at least one volley of accurate fire, something the Texans had already made themselves known for at the Alamo and many other battles. Many of the Mexican army ran. The short-lived battle became hand-to-hand. 600 Mexicans were killed, approximately 208 wounded, and 730 were taken prisoner, among of whom was a general masquerading as a private Santa Anna. Now at this point in time, Mexican morale was in an all-time low. Santa Anna was forced to peace, and he chose it. The other Mexican army, some historians say, couldn't have beaten a force half the Texan size. They were out of supply. They went home. Now, nowadays, a lot of historians and people who would like to tell a different story of a republic that was born in liberty and self-sacrifice try to make this about Anglos and people of Mexican heritage or people of other races. No, this was about liberty. It was about principle, and it was about constitutional government. A constitutional government had been taken from the Texan colonists as well as the Tejanos who were here before them. The Tejanos before them had revolted against Santa Anna, as had the colonists. Texas had allies up and down the Mexican coast. Santa Anna murdered his way up and down that coast to get here put good people to the sword that believed in liberty and constitutional government. One of whom who escaped, Lorenzo de Zavala, was the first vice president of this Republic of Texas and was in Galveston and made it just ahead of some of Santa Anna's scouts. He was in Galveston as reserve to represent the government if they got the rest of us. It's about liberty, folks. Juan Seguin. Some of y'all have seen the new Alamo movie. It's not as bad as people try to say it is. It shows him going in and out of that fort. He did that. He snuck by them to get in and out of that fort and run messages. He was also the man who buried what remained of the Alamo defenders. Juan Seguin commanded cavalry of Tejanos at San Jacinto. Now, legend says they wore a player's card either in their hat or in a band around their arm so they wouldn't be mistaken for irregular Mexican troops. To show you how diverse this crowd was, Sidney Sherman was born in all places in Marlborough, Massachusetts. He commanded the left wing at San Jacinto, and after the battle he became general of the Texas Army. It's not about where you're from, it's about where you're going and what you believe. I would encourage y'all, the ballot box still works. I'd say let's use it. Let's use it now. Encourage your friends and your neighbors to vote in important elections. Put better people in office that respect your rights. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate the people that put this together. It's been my dream for the last dozen years or so to actually have a San Jacinto celebration in Ellis County. I want to thank y'all, Harlan and TJ and the rest of y'all that made this happen. And I think times are a little different now. Thank y'all. Remember Texas.